Imagine stepping outside your door at dawn, expecting nothing more than the cool scent of pine and the first sip of coffee, only to find a massive dragon staring back at you, trembling, injured, and with tears in its eyes, holding a dying baby in its jaws. In that frozen moment, you realize it isn't here to harm you. It's here to ask for your help. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. Dr. Maren Ashford had grown used to the quiet of the Vesper Highlands. The remote station where she lived was surrounded by thick pine forests, planted during the first wave of Mars terraforming. Every morning began the same way. Wake up, put on her worn boots, step outside for a breath of fresh air before making her first cup of coffee. This morning, the air was cool and clean, carrying the faint scent of pine resin and damp soil. Soft light spilled over the hills, brushing the treetops with gold. Maren opened the creaking door of her outpost and stepped onto the porch, still half asleep, stretching her arms as she yawned. Then she froze. Standing only a few steps away was a dragon. Its body was huge, the color of weathered bronze, with darker plates of scale along its back and wings. The creature seemed to fill the space between the porch and the forest, its presence so powerful that even the air felt heavy. The dragon did not roar or move forward. Instead, it stood trembling, its great wings half folded, as if the effort to keep standing was already too much. Mud streaked its legs, and deep scratches marked its neck. The edges of its wings were torn, and its breathing came in slow, uneven bursts. But what caught Maren's attention most were its eyes. Large, amber, and glistening, they were filled with moisture, tears rolling down over scales that shimmered faintly in the dawn light. She had never seen an animal cry, not in all her years studying the adapted life forms of Mars. There was something in that gaze, something painfully familiar. Sorrow, fear, and a plea for help. Then Maren noticed what the dragon carried. Dangling gently from its jaws was a small dragonling. Its body was limp, scales pale with a faint green shimmer, wings folded in at awkward angles. One wing appeared bent, and a faint dark line across its side suggested a deep wound. Its head hung to one side, its legs hanging like the arms of a cloth doll. Maren's pulse quickened. Every story she had heard from the rangers about dragons warned against getting too close. They were apex predators, intelligent and unpredictable. But this scene did not fit those warnings. There was no growl, no show of teeth. The dragon was not a hunter. She was a mother. Maren took a slow step back toward the door. The dragon's head followed her movement, but instead of closing the distance, it lowered itself slightly, as though to stay non-threatening. Then, with a careful tilt of her head, the mother dragon stepped forward, just enough to place the dragonling on the porch. The young one lay still. The mother stepped back 2 paces, sitting back on her haunches, tail curling slowly behind her. She kept her eyes fixed on Maren, unblinking, waiting. Maren's breath came fast. She could close the door now, hide inside, and wait for the dragon to leave. But something about the stillness of the creature, the way it had placed the small one down and backed away, told her this was not a threat. This was a desperate request. She crouched slowly, her hands hovering over the dragonling without touching. Up close, she could see the tiny scales were soft, not yet hardened like its mother's armor-like plates. The edges of one wing were torn, and its breathing was shallow, barely there, just a faint rise and fall under its ribs. Maren looked up into the mother's gaze. "I'll try," she said quietly, unsure if the dragon could understand, but feeling the words were necessary. The dragon did not move. Carefully, Marin removed her jacket, wrapped it around the dragonling, and lifted the small, fragile body into her arms. She stood slowly, moving toward the door without turning her back on the mother. The dragon's eyes followed her every step. Inside, Marin laid the young one on a folded blanket in the center of her small living room. She glanced through the window. The mother dragon still sat outside, motionless, her shape a dark silhouette against the brightening forest. Marin's heart pounded. She had no training in dragon care, no idea what the right steps were. But she knew one thing. Time was running out for the little one. As she knelt beside the dragonling, she studied its tiny claws, the faint tremble of its tail, the coldness of its body. The mother's silent vigil outside felt like a constant reminder of the trust placed in her hands. The quiet in the room was heavy. Only the faint hum of the heating vents and the slow, shallow breaths of the dragonling broke the stillness. Marin realized that whatever happened next, this moment, the encounter at dawn, was something she would never forget. It was not a planned meeting. It was not part of any research. It was something else entirely. Something that reached beyond science into the raw, unspoken connection between living beings. And as the light grew brighter through the window, Marin felt the weight of that connection settle over her like a silent vow. She had been chosen, and now she had to act. Marin moved quickly, wrapping the dragonling in a second blanket to keep in what little warmth it had left. She could feel its tiny heartbeat, weak, irregular, against her palms. Its breathing was shallow, almost silent. She knew the little one would not survive without immediate care. Her hands shook as she reached for the comm unit on the wall. There was only one person she could think to call. "Davin, it's Marin," she said, her voice low but urgent. A moment of static filled the air before the reply came. "Marin, what's wrong? You sound—" "I don't have time to explain," she cut in. "I have a young dragon here. It's hurt badly. What do I do?" There was silence on the line, then a sharp intake of breath. "You're serious?" "Yes, it's here in my living room. The mother brought it to me. I don't know how to help." Davin's voice steadied into something brisk and clear. "Keep it warm. Do not try to feed it solid food. Get clean water ready and, if you can, mix a little sugar or honey into it. Feed it drop by drop. Check for bleeding. Keep the room quiet. Move slowly so it doesn't panic." Marin's mind raced. "Okay, I can do that." She set the comm down and went to work. The heating pad from her storage drawer still worked, though it took a moment to warm up. She layered soft cloth over it before laying the dragonling down. Its eyes remained closed, its sides barely moving with each breath. In the kitchen, she found a jar of sweet syrup she had made months ago from imported Mars fruit. She mixed a small amount into warm water, testing the temperature with her wrist. With a small dropper from her plant lab kit, she returned to the dragonling and gently pressed the tip against its mouth. The first drop simply slid past without a reaction. She tried again, speaking softly. "Come on, little one, just a little." On the third try, she saw the smallest flicker, a twitch in the tongue, a faint swallow. Marin exhaled, realizing she had been holding her breath. Outside, the shadow of the mother dragon still loomed. Marin glanced through the window. The great creature sat as still as stone, her gaze fixed on the house. The sight gave Marin a strange mix of comfort and pressure, as if the dragon's silent watch was both trust and a test. Time passed slowly. Marin repeated the process, giving a few drops of the sweetened water every few minutes, keeping the dragonling covered and warm. She examined the bent wing, noting how the delicate bones did not align properly. A dark, crusted wound along its side told her it had been attacked, though by what, she could only guess. Her training in xenobotany had not prepared her for this. She was used to cataloging leaf structures, studying soil samples, and analyzing pollen counts, not fighting for the life of a fragile creature that by all logic should be far beyond her help. Yet she could not stop. As the morning stretched into midday, the dragonling's breathing grew a little stronger. Its claws moved once, curling in the blanket as if grasping at a dream. Marin felt a surge of hope, though she did not let herself relax. She knew recovery could turn at any moment. By afternoon, exhaustion began to set in. She had not eaten, had not made her coffee, had not moved far from the small bundle on her heating pad. The room smelled faintly of pine from the open window, and every now and then she would hear the faint rustle of the mother dragon shifting outside. At one point, Marin opened the door just enough to step onto the porch. The dragon's head lifted, her eyes locking with Marin's. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the dragon lowered her head again, as if acknowledging that the human was doing what she could. Back inside, Marin continued the slow, steady care. Dropper of water, gentle adjustments of the blankets, soft words spoken to the small, still form. When the first signs of evening crept into the highlands, the dragonling opened one eye. Just a narrow slit, enough to reveal a glimmer of gold-green iris. It blinked once, then closed again, but the moment was enough to send a wave of relief through Marin. She sat back, rubbing her face, feeling both drained and determined. The fight was not over, but the little one was still here. And that, she thought, was reason enough to keep going. The mother dragon remained outside as the sky deepened into orange and violet. Her presence was like a quiet anchor holding the day together. As Marin checked the heating pad and refreshed the water mixture, she realized something had shifted inside her. This was no longer just a rescue. It was a promise, a silent agreement made in the space between two species. ... Under the fading light of the Martian sky, she whispered, "Stay with me, little one. We're not done yet." And in the quiet that followed, the small, steady breaths of the dragonling felt like the most important sound in the world. The days that followed became a careful rhythm. Marin woke at first light, checked the heating pad, and offered Solon, her chosen name for the dragonling, small sips of sweetened water. She cleaned his wounds gently. Other days, she stayed in the shadows of the trees, almost invisible among the dark trunks. But she always returned, always waited. By the second week, Solon's scales had deepened in color, the bronze now catching flecks of green in the sunlight streaming through the window. He began exploring the small living room, testing his legs and stretching his wings carefully. He moved with a cautious curiosity, stopping to sniff at bookshelves, rugs, and Marin's boots. Marin knew she was crossing an invisible line. She had started speaking to him often, narrating her movements so he wouldn't startle. "This is just water," she would say while refilling his dish. "These are clean bandages." The more she spoke, the more Solon seemed to respond with flicks of his tail or slow blinks of his eyes. But Marin also knew this was temporary. She reminded herself that Solon was not a pet. He was a wild creature, one that belonged to the highlands and the endless skies above the forest. One cold morning, while Solon curled near the heating pad after his meal, the sound of a rover approaching broke the quiet. Marin stepped onto the porch and saw Ranger Leora Vance dismounting from the driver's seat. Leora was known for her directness, and the serious look on her face told Marin this was not a friendly visit. "I heard you've been caring for a young dragon," Leora said, walking up the steps, "and that its mother has been staying close to your station." Marin hesitated, but there was no point in denying it. That's true. She brought him here. He was badly hurt. Leora glanced toward the forest where the mother dragon's shape was faintly visible. Wildlife Control knows. They plan to arrive in 3 days to take the dragonling. They might try to relocate the mother too. I can delay them a little, but not for long. You need to decide what you're going to do. The words sank in like a heavy stone in Marin's chest. Relocate was just another way of saying the bond between mother and child would be broken. When Leora left, Marin stood in the doorway, watching Solon. He was batting at a loose thread in the blanket, his small claws catching the fabric. His movements were clumsy but improving. That night, Marin couldn't sleep. She sat at the table with a mug of tea, staring at the window where the dark outline of the mother dragon stood like a sentinel. She thought about everything that had happened since that dawn when the dragon appeared on her porch. Keeping Solon here meant safety for him in the short term, but it also meant denying him the life he was meant for, flying through the highland skies, learning to hunt, growing strong alongside his kind. Releasing him meant trusting the wild again, trusting the mother who had risked everything to bring him here. Marin knew there was no choice that would spare her from the ache of losing him. But deep down, she also knew what was right. At first light, she walked to the window. Solon was still sleeping, his small body curled in the blankets, his breathing steady. She whispered to herself, "It's time." Over the next 2 days, Marin prepared for the journey. She reinforced a large travel crate with soft lining, placed Solon's favorite blanket inside, and even tucked in a worn leather glove he often played with. She made sure to pack a small supply of dried meat and water, though she knew the mother would provide once they were together again. The night before she planned to leave, Marin sat with Solon in the dim light of the living room. He had grown stronger than she ever expected in such a short time. His eyes, now brighter than the first day, watched her with calm attention as she stroked the uninjured side of his wing. "You're not mine to keep," she said softly, "but you'll always be part of my story." Outside, the wind whispered through the pine trees, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. Somewhere beyond that darkness, the mother dragon waited. Marin felt the weight of what tomorrow would bring. She would return Solon to the wild before anyone could interfere. It was the only way to protect him and to honor the trust that had been placed in her. As she turned off the lights and let the quiet settle in, she knew this chapter of their shared time was ending. But another was about to begin, one written under open skies, in the language of flight and freedom. The morning came quietly, the air in the Vesper Highlands cool and still. Thin mist clung to the ground, curling around the pine trunks and drifting across the forest edge. Marin stood on the porch, the travel crate beside her. Inside, Solon shifted, curious but calm, his golden green eyes watching her every move. She had packed carefully, soft blankets, the leather glove he liked to bat around, and a few strips of dried meat. The mother dragon would provide for him soon, but she wanted the first part of his journey to feel safe. Marin glanced toward the trees. Though she could not see the mother dragon, she knew she was there. She had been there every day, waiting. The rover's engine started with a low hum. Marin drove slowly along the narrow dirt path that wound deep into the highlands, passing through thick stands of pine and open stretches where the morning sun painted the ground in gold. Solon stayed quiet, occasionally tilting his head as if listening to sounds only he could hear. After nearly an hour, Marin reached a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. The air smelled of resin and damp moss. She stopped the rover, turned off the engine, and stepped out. The clearing felt untouched, peaceful and alive. She opened the crate door. Solon hesitated, sniffing the cool air, then placed one small clawed foot on the grass. The earth here was different from the smooth floors of Marin Station. It was uneven, soft, and covered with fallen needles. "This is your real home," Marin said quietly. He stepped further out, pausing to look around. The forest was silent, except for the faint drip of water from the branches. Then, from the edge of the clearing, came the sound of breaking twigs. Marin turned her head. The mother dragon emerged slowly from the shadows, her bronze scales glinting in the filtered light. She looked stronger than the first day Marin had seen her. Though faint scars still traced her neck and wings, her gaze went straight to Solon. Solon froze for a moment, torn between instinct and the bond he had formed with Marin. His tail flicked once, then again. He looked back at her, tilting his head as if asking what to do. Marin took a step back, giving him space. "Go on," she said softly. The mother made a low sound, a mix between a growl and a deep purr, and Solon moved toward her. His steps were small at first, then quicker.
But before reaching her, he turned and ran back to Marin. He pressed his head against her knee, warm scales cool against the fabric of her pants. Marin knelt, resting a hand lightly on his back. "You're ready," she whispered. "Go live your life, little one." This time, when she nudged him gently forward, he didn't stop. He crossed the last stretch between them and reached his mother. She lowered her head, sniffing along his sides, checking him from head to tail as if making sure he was truly whole. For a moment, the two stood together in stillness, their silhouettes framed by the tall pines. Then, to Marin's surprise, the mother dragon turned her gaze on her. She didn't nod or bow, but her wings shifted slightly, opening just enough to catch the light before folding back again. It was a gesture without words, yet it carried meaning, a quiet recognition, an acknowledgement of trust returned. Marin stepped back until she was at the rover. She didn't want to intrude on their space. She watched as the mother and Solon turned toward the forest, moving slowly at first, then disappearing into the shadows between the trees. For a long time, Marin stood in the clearing, the sounds of the forest slowly returning. She felt the ache of absence settle in her chest, but it was softened by the knowledge that she had done the right thing. The drive back to the station felt longer than the trip out. The rooms inside seemed larger, quieter. She gathered Solon's blankets, the small glove, and the dish he used, placing them carefully into a wooden box. She carried it to the attic, knowing she wouldn't need them again, yet unable to throw them away. Weeks passed, and Marin returned to her routine, studying plant growth, collecting samples, and walking through the forest paths near the station. Sometimes she caught herself glancing toward the tree line, half expecting a flicker of bronze scales. Then, one crisp autumn morning, she stepped outside and stopped. On the porch, placed neatly near the door, was a cluster of small, smooth stones, unlike anything found in the highlands. They were warm to the touch, with a faint golden shimmer. Marin looked toward the forest. For a moment, she thought she saw movement between the trees, a flash of bronze. A smaller shape beside it, but the shapes melted into the shadows before she could be sure. She smiled, kneeling to gather the stones. The gifts kept coming, once every autumn. Sometimes it was unusual crystals, other times a perfect shell from the distant Martian cliffs. Always left in the same place. Each one was a quiet reminder of the weeks she had shared with a young dragon and the mother who had trusted her. Marin kept the stones in a small carved box on her desk. Whenever visitors asked where they came from, she would simply say, "They're from a friend in the highlands." But in her heart, she knew they were more than that. They were proof that kindness can cross even the widest of divides, that trust can grow between the most different of worlds, and that letting go is sometimes the truest way to protect what we care about most. And somewhere out there, in the endless green of the highland forests, a dragon and her young still remembered.